Michael Tyler, known to the music world as Mystikal, walked into a state courthouse outside Baton Rouge, Louisiana on Tuesday and entered a guilty plea to third-degree rape. The plea, entered just weeks before a scheduled trial date, brings one of the more prolonged legal cases in recent hip-hop history to what appears to be its final chapter. Tyler is 55 years old, and if the name Mystikal rings a bell, it is because at the turn of the millennium he was one of the most recognizable voices in American rap music. But for the past 2 decades, his story has been defined far less by his music than by an accumulating record of criminal charges, convictions, and courtroom appearances. So how did a Grammy-nominated artist with a #1 album end up here, facing up to 20 years in state prison? The answer requires looking back well before the 2022 arrest that triggered this latest case. Tyler's first major legal reckoning came in 2004 when he was convicted of sexual assault and extortion in a case involving his personal hairstylist. The details of that case were serious enough that Tyler was sentenced to 6 years in prison and upon release was required to register as a sex offender. That conviction alone would have permanently altered the trajectory of most careers. Tyler, however, attempted to rebuild. He continued recording and performing in the years that followed, and there was a period when it seemed as though he might manage to separate his professional identity from his legal past. That attempt at separation did not hold. In 2012, he was jailed for 3 months following an arrest on a misdemeanor domestic abuse charge. The incident reinforced a pattern that observers had already begun to note. Then, in 2017, the situation escalated sharply when Tyler was charged with rape and kidnapping. Those charges, which drew significant national attention given his history, were ultimately dropped by prosecutors. The reasons for that dismissal were not widely detailed in public reporting, but the outcome meant Tyler avoided another conviction at that time. So when he was arrested again in 2022, the question that immediately arose was how the legal system would handle a case involving a man with his specific background. What exactly were the charges brought against him this time? The 2022 case centered on allegations made by a woman who told investigators a deeply troubling account. She said that Tyler had raped her, beaten her, and choked her. Beyond the physical violence, she alleged that he had taken her phone and her car keys, preventing her from leaving the location. And then, according to her account, he forced her to send him money through the digital payment platform Cash App. That last detail, the alleged financial coercion layered on top of the physical assault, contributed to a charging document that was more extensive than many had anticipated. Prosecutors charged Tyler with first-degree rape, simple robbery, domestic abuse battery, and false imprisonment. Taken together, those original charges carried a consequence that would have removed any possibility of Tyler ever walking free again. Under Louisiana law, a conviction on those original counts would have meant mandatory life imprisonment. Tyler entered a plea of not guilty when those charges were initially filed. His legal team contested the case, and the matter moved through the court system toward a trial date that had been set for March 30th of this year. But before that trial could begin, something shifted. What changed in the weeks leading up to that court date, and why did Tyler decide to change his plea? The answer lies in a negotiated agreement between the defense and the prosecution. Tyler's guilty plea to the reduced charge of third-degree rape was part of a deal that significantly altered the legal stakes. Instead of facing the certainty of a mandatory life sentence if convicted at trial, Tyler now faces a sentencing range with a maximum of 20 years. His sentencing hearing has been tentatively scheduled for June. The precise terms of the agreement, including whether there is a recommended sentence that prosecutors will propose to the judge, have not been fully detailed in public reporting. But the broad structure is clear. Tyler acknowledged guilt on a serious felony charge in exchange for the removal of the most severe potential consequences. Plea agreements of this kind are common in American criminal courts, and they serve different purposes for different parties. For prosecutors, a guilty plea guarantees accountability and spares the victim the experience of testifying at trial. For the defense, it eliminates the risk of a worse outcome before a jury. Whether the victim in this case was consulted about or supports the agreement is not something that has been publicly confirmed. What is known is that the case has now moved past the trial phase entirely, and Tyler will appear before a judge for sentencing in the coming months. Setting aside the legal mechanics for a moment, the broader story here is one that raises persistent questions about the entertainment industry and the way it has historically responded to legal trouble involving prominent artists. Mystikal's career is, in some respects, a textbook example of a pattern that has received increasing scrutiny over the past decade. His hit single from the year 2000, "Shake Your Ass," was a genuine commercial phenomenon. It reached audiences around the world. It even appeared in a notable cameo in the British film About a Boy, starring Hugh Grant, Toni Collette, and Nicholas Hoult, which extended its cultural reach well beyond its original American audience. An album of his debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. He received 2 Grammy nominations. By any conventional measure of commercial success in the music business, he had arrived at the highest level. And yet, even as that success was building, the legal troubles that would come to define his public identity were already present or emerging. The question that has followed artists in similar situations for years is whether commercial success provides a kind of insulation from accountability, or at least from the public perception of accountability. Whether the music industry, media coverage, or fan bases respond differently to serious legal allegations when the person involved has cultural value that can be monetized. It is a question without a simple answer, and it is one that applies far beyond Mystikal specifically. But his case gives it a particular weight, given the length of the record involved. This is not a single incident being evaluated in isolation. It is a pattern spanning more than 20 years, involving multiple arrests, a prior conviction with a sex offender registration requirement, and now a second guilty plea on a sex crime charge. For the victim in the 2022 case, the plea agreement represents the formal legal conclusion of a process that began when she came forward to investigators and described what she said was done to her. Whether that conclusion feels adequate, given the reduction from the original charges, is something only she can assess. Her account, as described in the charging documents, depicted a situation involving not just physical violence, but deliberate control and financial exploitation. The fact that elements of that original charge were removed as part of the plea deal will be viewed differently by different people. And that divergence in reaction is itself part of a larger national conversation about how seriously the justice system treats crimes of this nature. What remains now is the sentencing phase. A judge in Louisiana will weigh the facts of this case, Tyler's prior criminal history, and the terms of the plea agreement before determining how long he will spend in prison. Given his age and the 20-year maximum under the reduced charge, the outcome of that hearing will effectively determine a significant portion of whatever remains of his life outside of incarceration. Whether the judge follows any recommended sentencing range or exercises independent discretion is something that will become clearer as the June date approaches. For now, Michael Tyler, the man who recorded under the name Mystikal and once stood at the top of the American music charts, has entered the final legal reckoning of a career and a life that took a direction few would have predicted at the height of his commercial success.